The danger of seeing what others don't lies in the profound isolation it can create. When a person perceives truths or patterns hidden to the majority, they stand at the edge of common understanding. Carl Jung understood this well. He knew that the mind capable of seeing beyond accepted boundaries also carries the burden of being misunderstood. Such vision can be both a gift and a curse, for while it opens doors to new possibilities, it also distances one from the comfort of shared belief. Those who see differently often face skepticism, ridicule, or even hostility. History is filled with thinkers, artists, and visionaries whose insights were dismissed or condemned in their own time, only to be celebrated later. This gap between perception and acceptance can create deep loneliness, as the individual wrestles not only with the weight of their discovery, but also with the rejection of those around them. The fear of being cast out can silence voices that might have reshaped the world. Yet this danger is not only external. To see what others don't can fracture one's inner world. It challenges identity and belonging, pulling the mind into uncharted territory where the familiar rules no longer apply. Jung himself warned of the shadow within, the parts of the psyche we repress because they unsettle us. Those who peer too far into the hidden may awaken forces they are not prepared to integrate, and without balance, their vision can consume them. This is the paradox. To see differently is to be set apart, and to be set apart is to risk losing the very connection that makes human life bearable. Those who walk this path must do so carefully, holding their vision gently, and grounding themselves in the human bonds that keep the soul from drifting too far from shore. Isolation of unique perception often emerges as one of the most profound and painful consequences of seeing what others do not. When an individual perceives truths, patterns, or realities that escape the awareness of the majority, they step outside the shared framework of meaning that binds people together. This difference in perception may seem like an intellectual advantage, but it comes with an emotional cost that is often invisible to others. Human beings are social by nature, and much of our sense of safety and belonging comes from shared understanding, shared beliefs, values, and ways of seeing the world. To stand apart from that shared vision can make a person feel as if they are speaking a language no one else understands. It is not simply that others disagree, it is that others cannot even see what the person is pointing to. This creates a profound sense of disconnection. The isolation is not always immediate or obvious. It begins subtly as the individual realizes that conversations no longer flow easily, that their insights are met with confusion or dismissal. They may notice blank stares when they speak, or polite nods that mask incomprehension. Over time, this can develop into an internal tension, a growing gap between their inner reality and the outer world they inhabit. This tension can feel like being caught between two worlds, one vivid and clear in their own mind, and another that everyone else insists is the only real one. The effort to bridge this gap can be exhausting. Some individuals respond by withdrawing, keeping their perceptions hidden to avoid the pain of rejection or ridicule. Others persist in trying to explain, often meeting resistance that only deepens their sense of alienation. This isolation is intensified by the social instinct to conform. Most people are unconsciously invested in maintaining the boundaries of what is considered normal or acceptable thinking, because those boundaries provide stability and cohesion. Someone who sees beyond them threatens that stability, even if unintentionally. This makes the person with unique perception seem disruptive or unsettling. They might be labeled strange, eccentric, or even delusional, not because their ideas are false, but because they do not fit the accepted framework. Such labeling pushes them further to the margins, reinforcing their sense of being apart from others. This can gradually erode their confidence, causing them to question their own perception, or to feel guilt and shame for simply seeing differently. Isolation also affects emotional well-being. Without people who truly understand or validate their experience, the individual may feel unseen, unheard, and fundamentally alone. This loneliness can be heavier than simple physical solitude. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling invisible. It can lead to self-doubt, depression, or a withdrawal from relationships altogether. In some cases, it may even lead them to suppress or deny their own perceptions to regain a sense of belonging. Thus, what began as a gift of heightened vision becomes a source of suffering, not because of what is seen, but because of how utterly alone one feels in seeing it. Risk of rejection looms heavily over anyone who dares to express perceptions that differ from the norm. When an individual voices ideas or insights that lie outside the familiar patterns of thought, they often encounter not curiosity, but resistance. This resistance stems from the deeply rooted human instinct to preserve social harmony and protect collective beliefs. People generally find comfort in shared viewpoints because they create a sense of stability and belonging. When someone challenges that shared reality, it can be perceived as a threat, not just to ideas but to the cohesion of the group itself. As a result, the person who sees differently becomes vulnerable to skepticism, ridicule, or even hostility, simply for introducing perspectives that others are not prepared to consider. This rejection can manifest in subtle and overt ways. Sometimes it appears as dismissive comments, mocking tones, or polite but empty acknowledgments that signal disinterest. At other times, it becomes more direct. Arguments meant not to understand but to discredit, accusations of arrogance, or claims that the person is out of touch with reality. Such reactions are often less about the content of the new idea and more about the discomfort it stirs. People instinctively defend what they know because unfamiliar truths can unsettle their sense of security. The person offering a new perspective becomes a mirror, reflecting the limits of others' understanding, and many respond by trying to shatter the mirror rather than expand their vision. This social rejection can be especially painful because it strikes at the core of human needs. Acceptance and belonging are fundamental desires, and to be cast out, even symbolically, can wound deeply. The individual may begin to internalize the hostility, questioning whether there is something inherently wrong with them for seeing what others cannot. This self-doubt can corrode their confidence, making them hesitant to share their thoughts or contribute their ideas. Over time, repeated rejection can teach them to silence themselves, to hide their insights as a way of protecting their emotional safety. Yet this silence brings its own suffering, because it forces them to betray the truth they see in order to be accepted by those who cannot see it. The risk of rejection also creates a paradoxical pressure. On one hand, they feel compelled to speak, driven by the conviction that what they have perceived matters. On the other, they fear the consequences of doing so. This tension can lead to emotional exhaustion, as they try to find ways to translate their perspective into language others will accept, softening their message to avoid backlash. Even when they succeed in communicating, acceptance may be slow, and initial reactions may still be defensive or hostile. They must endure misunderstanding and criticism long before their insights gain recognition, if they ever do. This constant battle wears on the spirit, making each attempt to share feel like stepping once again into a storm of doubt and disapproval. History is filled with examples of individuals whose insights were rejected in their time, but celebrated later, revealing a persistent pattern in how society responds to new or unconventional ideas. This pattern shows that people who see differently often walk a lonely path, misunderstood in their present but honored in hindsight. Such figures are often labeled as dreamers, madmen, or heretics during their lifetimes because their ideas disrupt the familiar boundaries of thought. The unfamiliar challenges comfort, and most people instinctively defend what they already know. This resistance creates a barrier between visionary individuals and the societies they inhabit, delaying recognition of their contributions until a shift in collective understanding makes those once dismissed ideas appear groundbreaking. One striking aspect of this pattern is how predictable the cycle of rejection and later admiration can be. Many great minds in science, art, and philosophy first encountered mockery or disbelief. When Copernicus proposed that the Earth revolved around the sun, his ideas were seen as radical and even blasphemous. When Van Gogh painted with wild colors and unrestrained emotion, his work was dismissed as the product of a troubled mind, and he died poor and unknown. Centuries later, Their contributions are taught as cornerstones of human achievement. This reversal highlights that it is not necessarily the validity or depth of an idea that determines its initial reception, but how well it fits into the prevailing mindset of the time. Ideas too far ahead of their age appear incomprehensible until society gradually evolves to meet them. This delayed recognition also reveals how deeply social acceptance depends on timing. A person might articulate truths that could transform the world, but if the world is not ready, their words fall on deaf ears. This dissonance between insight and reception can be devastating. It can make the individual feel invisible, as if their vision exists in a different dimension from the reality most people occupy. The sense of alienation is intensified by watching others dismiss what they know to be meaningful, forcing them to live with the tension of holding truths that no one around them affirms. Often, only after they are gone do others begin to see what they saw, and by then the chance to affirm and support them personally has passed. This recurring pattern suggests that rejection of visionary thought is not a personal failure, but a feature of human nature. Societies tend to cling to the familiar until change becomes unavoidable, and those who see what is coming bear the burden of waiting for the world to catch up. Their struggle is not only to endure skepticism, but also to remain true to their vision while surrounded by disbelief. This makes their perseverance even more remarkable. They continue despite misunderstanding, planting seeds of ideas that may not bloom until long after they are gone, proving that the loneliness of seeing differently is often the price paid for contributing something enduring to humanity's shared future. Perceiving hidden truths can deeply unsettle a person's identity and sense of belonging, creating an internal conflict that is often more painful than any external rejection. Identity is largely built on the frameworks we inherit from the societies we grow up in, shared values, beliefs, and assumptions about how the world works. These frameworks give structure to our sense of self and our place in the world. When someone begins to see beyond these accepted patterns, they may experience a profound disorientation, as if the ground beneath their identity has shifted. What once felt certain begins to appear fragile or even false, and this destabilizes the foundations on which their sense of self was built. They are no longer fully at home in the worldview that shaped them, yet they may not have a new framework solid enough to replace it, leaving them caught between two worlds. This state of being between is emotionally exhausting. It is not simply about changing opinions or adopting new ideas. It is about a deeper reshaping of how reality itself is perceived. Such a shift can cause the individual to question everything: relationships, beliefs, goals, even their own character. What they used to accept without thought now feels open to scrutiny, and what others around them take for granted may seem hollow. This can create tension in everyday interactions, as they find themselves no longer resonating with the values or priorities of those they once felt close to. Conversations that once flowed easily may now feel forced, and the warmth of belonging begins to cool into a quiet sense of distance. This emotional separation can lead to guilt or grief, as if they are betraying the people and communities that shaped them simply by seeing differently. The internal conflict is intensified by the fear of losing connection. Humans depend on belonging not only for emotional comfort, but also for identity confirmation. We often know who we are through how others see us. When a person's perceptions drift too far from those around them, that mirror of identity starts to crack. They may feel invisible or misread, as if their inner world has become too foreign to be recognized. This creates a painful split. Part of them yearns to hold on to the old sense of self for the sake of connection, while another part is compelled to follow the truth they now perceive, even if it isolates them. It becomes a struggle between authenticity and acceptance, between the comfort of the familiar and the integrity of honoring what they see. This tension can erode self-trust. The individual may swing between confidence in their vision and doubt about their sanity, wondering if they are mistaken simply because so few others share their perception. That uncertainty eats at their stability, making it harder to stand firm in their new understanding. In this way, Perceiving hidden truths does not just change what they see, it reshapes who they believe themselves to be, pulling apart the threads of their old identity and leaving them to weave a new one from fragments of the unknown. Exploring hidden aspects of the mind, as Carl Jung described with the concept of the shadow, can be psychologically dangerous because it forces a person to confront parts of themselves that are deeply repressed or unacknowledged. The shadow represents the impulses, desires, fears, and traits that the conscious self rejects in order to maintain a coherent identity. These elements are not necessarily evil, but they often conflict with the values a person believes they should embody, so they are buried in the unconscious. When someone begins to see what others do not, whether new truths about the world or about themselves, they inevitably stir the shadow. This can be unsettling, because it reveals that the boundary between who they think they are and what lies hidden within them is far thinner than they imagined. The mind becomes divided, and this inner division can lead to confusion, anxiety, or even psychological breakdown if not approached with care. Confronting the shadow demands emotional strength, but it can also destabilize that very strength. A person might begin by seeking truth or clarity, only to find themselves overwhelmed by feelings they cannot fully understand or control. Long-buried anger, shame, or grief may surface unexpectedly, disrupting their relationships and sense of self. They might see qualities in themselves that they had judged harshly in others, leading to inner conflict and guilt. This process can shatter their self-image, leaving them unsure of who they really are. If they lack guidance or support, they may mistake this upheaval for personal failure or madness. The experience of being flooded by unconscious material can blur the line between insight and instability, making it hard to distinguish growth from collapse. The danger is heightened when this inner confrontation occurs without preparation or balance. Jung warned that diving too deeply into the unconscious without anchoring oneself in everyday reality can pull a person into psychic chaos. If someone becomes consumed by what they discover, they might withdraw from the external world, losing touch with practical responsibilities and human relationships. They can become trapped in endless self-analysis or in obsessive attempts to decode hidden meanings in everything, which only deepens their isolation. This detachment from reality can spiral into delusion, where the person's private perceptions overshadow the shared world around them. The very act of seeing more than others can then turn from enlightenment into obsession, from clarity into fragmentation. There is also the danger of identifying too strongly with what is found in the shadow. Instead of integrating these hidden parts, a person might glorify them, believing they have uncovered a superior truth that sets them above others. This can inflate the ego, creating arrogance or a messianic sense of purpose, which further distances them from the grounding influence of ordinary human connection. True integration of the shadow requires humility and balance, yet the initial encounter with it often destroys that balance. Without patience and support, the person risks being consumed by the very forces they set out to understand, proving that the search for hidden truths can endanger the mind as much as it enlightens it. Visionaries who see what others do not must stay grounded in human connection, because without that grounding, the isolation of their perception can consume them. Human beings are social creatures, and our emotional stability depends on bonds of trust, empathy, and shared experience. When someone begins to perceive truths beyond the common understanding, they naturally drift away from the familiar networks that once supported them. This distance can be intoxicating at first, as if they are stepping into a world of greater depth and meaning, but it is also dangerous. The more they detach from everyday relationships, the more their perspective risks becoming untethered, spiraling inward until it loses its link to reality. Human connection serves as an anchor. It reminds them that their perceptions exist within a living world, not just inside their own mind. Maintaining these connections requires conscious effort, because the visionary's experiences can make ordinary interactions feel shallow or frustrating. They may grow impatient with conversations that seem trivial or with people who appear unwilling to see beyond conventional boundaries. Yet if they allow this frustration to sever their ties, they lose more than social comfort. They lose the external reference points that help keep their thinking clear. Relationships challenge perception by offering other viewpoints, even when those viewpoints seem limited. They provide feedback that can reveal blind spots, distortions, or emotional biases that the visionary might overlook if left entirely alone with their thoughts. In this way, human connection does not dilute insight, it refines and stabilizes it. Connection also offers emotional nourishment, which is vital for withstanding the weight of seeing differently. The experience of carrying truths that others reject can be lonely and exhausting. Affection, friendship, and shared joy counteract that loneliness, replenishing the emotional energy needed to bear the burden of difference. Even if others cannot fully understand what the visionary perceives, their simple presence can remind them that they are still part of the human story. This belonging softens the sharp edge of isolation, giving them the strength to hold their vision without being broken by it. When they feel seen and valued as a person, not just as a bearer of strange ideas, they can endure misunderstanding without collapsing into despair. Remaining grounded in connection also protects against arrogance or obsession. Without the balancing influence of others, it is easy for someone who sees uniquely to begin believing they are entirely separate from or superior to those around them. This belief can inflate the ego and distort their purpose, turning their vision into a source of pride rather than a gift meant to serve humanity. Genuine relationships remind them of their shared humanity, that they are not outside or above the world, but within it. They draw the visionary back to the rhythms of ordinary life, listening, caring, giving, which keeps their vision rooted in compassion. In this way, staying connected becomes not a distraction from their insight, but the very thing that keeps it alive, meaningful, and safe from consuming them.